Scalding hot take! What if drum practice was overrated? What if all we really should be doing is playing with people? Now, if you know me at all, you know that's literally the opposite of what I think. I'm the practice guy. The 10,000 hours deliberate practice. Take somebody who thinks they're not talented enough and let them practice an hour a day for 10 years and they'll be killer. That guy. But just for the sake of argument, let's entertain the other side. Because when I was in music school, I had a classmate who bragged he hardly even practiced. Sure, he'd learned all the basics, but he spent all his time rehearsing and playing. And he sounded very mature and was getting a lot of gigs in music school. But I don't think he was making the strongest argument. And I think there is a valid argument to be made. And we're going to make it here, test it, then see what we can take from it to make our practice better. Or our not practice better. I'm Nate, this is the 80/20 Drummer, and today we're asking, is practice overrated? Stay tuned. And folks, if you're watching this, there are going to be a few abstract concepts and a few things you might want to apply to your own practice. And if you're wondering if you need to take notes, the answer is no, you do not, because we've done it for you. You can get our free study guide for free by clicking the link below the player and telling us where to send it on the next page. That's it. Now, on with the lesson. Let's start super theoretical. Why practice at all? Why not just get our reps in rehearsal or on gigs? Like, say we had a hypothetical rehearsal band who would play with us no matter how bad we sounded. Why not just work everything out with them? The answer isn't as intuitive as you might think. This is actually part 4 of a 4-part series on what it takes to get good at the drums. And in part 3, which you can watch at the card on your screen, we proposed a scenario. If you're watching this and you're lucky enough to travel, you've probably stayed in a hotel or an Airbnb, or couch surfed at a friend's home. And if you had to take a shower and get ready to go out, let alone make an omelet, it would take you longer than at home. That's because at home, you know where everything is. But you don't just know it intellectually, you actually have muscle memory. The next time you brush your teeth at home, reflect on the fact that you're probably making the same 43 discrete movements night after night, and that your subconscious has chunked all of this so you don't even have to think about it. Why? Because of repetition. You've done it thousands of times. So we know repetition works. But how many repetitions does it take to master a discrete skill? Let's go back to our studio band, who gamely rehearses with you no matter what, and doesn't mind you playing the songs wrong over and over and over. Eventually, you're going to discover that some parts of the songs give you more trouble than others, and think, wait a minute, instead of wasting all these folks' time, what if I just took an hour and worked alone on these specific parts? And practice was born. The theoretical reason for deliberate practice is to pack more reps into a shorter amount of time. If there's a difficult part that only happens twice during an hour-long big band set, you'd have to play that set hundreds of times before it's fully second nature. But if you pull out the tough part, it might only take 2 minutes to get a rep. You can get 200 reps in a single afternoon. So that's the major argument for deliberate practice. You can save a ton of time by isolating the hard parts and doing tons of reps on them. It's actually 80/20 in a nutshell. So how could this possibly go wrong? Well, for starters, relevancy matters. Like, let's say you were filming a cooking contest at your friend's house. For some reason. Just work with me. You'd probably want to practice first, so you knew where everything was and how long everything took in that environment. As we said, you'd want to get reps on the hard parts, like knowing where the blender is and how long your buddy's stove takes to heat up. That's why you'd practice in his kitchen instead of your own, and practice specific things instead of just generalized cooking. But what if instead of practicing the dishes you intended to create, you practiced other specific dishes? That's still deliberate practice. That's still specific goals. But it probably won't save you much time over just generalized cooking because of another thing I talked about in part 3. Relevance. The specific thing you practice needs to be relevant to what you're trying to do. To take our studio band example, you wouldn't go into the shed and specifically practice a chart that wasn't even on the gig, and which had a totally different feel. That's specific, but it's not relevant. The astute viewer might already be piecing together where I'm going with this. We need one more piece. Say it with me, simulacra. Oh yeah. Look it up, but for today's purposes, let's just say simulacra is a representation of a real thing. A painting of an ice cream cone, for instance. Or a statue of a president or a historical figure. And deliberate practice seeks to simulate real life, but in a compressed way, which allows you to get reps. A few examples. Single strokes are simulacra for places you'd utilize singles in fills in a musical setting. Swing coordination is a simulacrum for the interlinked dance your limbs will be doing playing a swing beat behind a real soloist. And I'm really trying to bring this home. So why am I using this crazy $10 word? Because it gets at a key trade-off in practice. In order to isolate something so we can get specific reps on it, we have to abstract away from the real-life application. Those singles on the pad are probably not what you'd play on a real-life gig. You'd probably be playing improvised stuff around the kit. Those chip and swing exercises are not the exact thing you'd be playing behind Sonny Rollins. You'd be mixing and matching more, leaving more space, responding more to the soloist. So in order to isolate something to get a lot of reps in a short time, you have to abstract away from the reality. And where deliberate practice can go wrong is if you do a bad simulacrum. By the way, I'm using simulacrum and simulation a little interchangeably here, and they don't mean exactly the same thing. Simulacrum could mean any abstract representation of a thing, and simulation means trying to rehearse something you do in real life. But I think simulations are a special case of simulacra. Just throwing this in here in case I've got some linguistic sticklers in the audience.
Now, let's look at a few more examples of bad simulations, as special cases of simulacra that don't improve much on just repping the real thing.
The most relevant simulation might be literal simulators. Pilots use simulator training for exactly what we've been talking about with deliberate practice. We want pilots well-trained for any emergency. But emergencies luckily arise so seldom in real life that your average line pilot wouldn't get enough reps without the simulator. Lots of pilots go their whole careers without seeing an engine failure, but they need to be able to react to one immediately and instinctively, so they drill them again and again in the simulator. So engine failures are a good simulacra because they're a legitimate hard part about flying, and pilots can get a lot of specific reps in the simulator that they'd never see in real life until it was too late. But what about bad simulacra? Well, it turns out there's actually a pretty good real-life example in aviation. In the 90s, some trainers taught pilots to perform a very specific maneuver in certain loss of control events. They practiced this move in the simulator. When they encountered certain things, they were supposed to do this specific thing. Then, in 2001, a pilot reacted with this technique to an event that felt appropriate, but which wasn't. And he made things way worse, and tragically ended up crashing his plane in the Rockaways.
Plane crashed. Where? Into the houses.
Hey, you guys told me you love these long-winded theoretical explorations. Anyway, after a review, the whole upset recovery curriculum was modified because people realized pilots could make benign situations worse by misdiagnosing them and overreacting with this specific technique. So even in simulators, we have bad simulacra sometimes.
But what about in drums?
Well, the classic example is having a set standard practice routine that doesn't adapt at all to your real day-to-day life on the kit. What if instead of shedding the hard parts of your studio band charts, you went and shedded fast singles only, and after your singles were already fast enough to play this gig? So let's bring this in for a landing. We need deliberate practice, because if we had to rely on real life to get all the reps on hard things, we'd waste a ton of time mindlessly playing through the easy parts we already knew. If the hard part is only 2 minutes of an hour set, you can shed that 30 times in an hour in the practice room, but only once in real life. But every time we abstract away a real life skill for practice, we're risking it creeping so far from the original activity that it loses its utility. So, the smart version of the don't practice, just play rehearsals and gigs is, once you already have your fundamentals together, you won't save much time practicing irrelevant and arbitrary exercises you can already do over just getting real reps in the real world.
But obviously we need a happy medium in this, because it's not either or.
In real life, great players I've spoken to will adjust up and down the level of real-world chaotic exploration and the level of very focused specific exercises. And you can also do everything in the practice room. Sometimes it's just good to improvise or groove and see what comes out. That's kind of maximum relevancy practice, because that's what you do in real life. There's no danger of wasting your time on some arbitrary exercise you're not going to use because you're practicing by using stuff. Other times, it's good to take a very specific thing, isolate it, and drill it relentlessly. We sacrifice a little relevance for specificity, but what we get back is way more potent practice for that specific skill. And this is a little bit of an advanced technique, but a lot of drummers I speak to use the generalized practice to figure out the specific things to work on. So, is drum practice overrated? A little, but it depends on what you mean by practice. If we're talking about specific reps on very relevant things, if anything, it's underrated.
And that's how you get the gig.
Anyway, did we do a thing, you guys? Thanks for accompanying me on that meandering journey. This is probably the farthest afield from practical drum stuff we'll get for a while. If you dug this one, leave a comment below. And dudes, you know the drill. If you'd like a free study guide for this, you don't have to do it yourself. Just click below the player and enter your email address in on the next page and we'll send that to you. You'll also get a free drum course and the podcast and the weekly video early for you every week. How about that? Here's this memory. I hope you enjoyed this. See you again real soon in another lesson of the week. Hey, hey, hey. Ice cream, fuck it. Fuck it. Like, it's not gonna go away. And that's how you get the gag.